Today we're doing something a little different, focusing on a short story, actually. It's called Intermezzo by Sally Rooney.
Okay.
And Rooney's really known for these sharp, insightful looks at relationships, especially in books like Normal People and Conversations with Friends.
Yeah.
And this story, well, it definitely fits right in there.
Right.
It digs into intimacy, the kind of push and pull you get with power dynamics in a relationship, and that feeling of, figuring out who you are, all set against this beautiful Italian coast.
Right.
What was it that really stood out to you when you first read this one?
I think it's really interesting how Rooney takes Italy, a place we usually think of as romantic, idyllic, right? Escapes, all that. And she uses it to actually highlight how disconnected and uneasy the characters are.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like even the heat, even how beautiful the landscape is. Instead of feeling passionate, it's almost suffocating. Wow. Which really mirrors the tension that's building in their relationship.
It's true. You don't always think about that, how those elements can flip.
Yeah.
That's such a good observation. Makes me think about her other books, too, actually. She seems to use setting in this really deliberate way.
It's true.
It's not just a pretty backdrop. It's like the Italian sun is practically another character in the story.
Exactly.
Adding all this extra weight to what's going on.
It's subtle, but it's such a powerful technique.
Yeah.
Instead of giving you these long descriptions, she uses just a few details, sensory things like the heat, how unfamiliar everything feels.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that reflects what's happening inside the characters, too. We feel their discomfort, that tension.
Yeah.
They're tourists in Italy, but they're also kind of tourists in their own relationship.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just the setting, is it? There's this other layer of kind of uneasiness to the story.
Right.
I was really struck by how Rooney uses dialogue, or actually like the lack of dialogue.
Yes.
It's like the silences between the words say even more than what they're actually talking about.
Absolutely. She's so good at capturing that thing we all do.
Oh, tell me.
Where you kind of dance around the hard conversation.
Oh, yeah!
You hesitate, you overthink every word, or you just let that silence hang there because actually it's saying so much.
It's so true. I can think of a million conversations I've had like that, where the unspoken stuff is like deafening almost.
Exactly.
So how do you see that dynamic working in Intermezzo with the two main characters?
Well, there's that scene, remember, where they're just talking about their plans for the day.
Yeah.
On the surface, it's nothing, right?
Right.
Totally mundane. But underneath, you can just feel all these unspoken emotions. Those questions they're too scared to ask each other.
Wow. Yeah.
All those doubts they're both carrying around.
It's those little things, isn't it? Those subtle cues that make you really pay attention. And that makes me think about the whole power dynamic thing, too. Because even in the silences, there's this feeling of one character trying to take control, almost like they're fighting over whose story it really is.
Exactly. That's how Rooney shows us the power dynamics in their relationship.
Yeah.
And it's not big fights or like someone trying to be dominant all the time.
Right.
It's in the pauses, the way one of them might steer the conversation while the other one backs off.
It's so subtle, like a dance they're doing.
Yes.
And what's even more interesting is how those roles switch throughout the story. Sometimes it feels like one of them has more power, and then it subtly shifts. It's so real, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, think about any relationship. Those little power shifts happen all the time.
They do.
It makes you wonder, is this just them? Or is it being made more intense because they're on vacation? Because they're out of their element,
Yeah. It makes you think about how being on vacation, being away from everything familiar, it kind of adds this whole other level to things.
Right.
It's like when you're out of your routine, you start to question everything, even who you are a little bit.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's part of what's happening for them in the story?
Totally. The vocation becomes this catalyst,
Yeah.
away from their normal lives, their rules, all that. They have to just sit with themselves. And not just with each other, but with their own, anxieties, what they want.
It makes you wonder if they hadn't gone on this trip, would any of this even be coming up?
Right.
It's like that saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Exactly.
You can't outrun yourself, can you?
No.
Even in a beautiful Italian coastal town.
Yeah.
Speaking of things you can't outrun, that ending.
Oh, yeah.
I have to admit, I was kind of left hanging. More questions than answers. What'd you make of it?
That's Rooney for you, right?
I guess so.
She's not going to give you a neat little bow on everything. Life's messy.
Sure enough.
And her stories are going to reflect that. We're left with that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Which I think, honestly, makes us keep thinking about the story even longer.
it definitely lingered with me. And, you know, sometimes those are the stories that hit the hardest, the ones you have to wrestle with yourself.
Totally. There are no easy answers in Intermezzo.
No kidding.
But it makes you pay attention to those silences, those unspoken things. That's where the real story is.
It really does. Well, listeners, if you're looking for a story that'll stick with you, make you examine your own relationships, all those little things we don't say, definitely give Intermezzo a read. You can find a link in our show notes. And until next time, keep diving deep.